Yeah, but he's got to thread a needle. So, John, I still think he's actually doing the right strategy, but I think there's a giant problem with the strategy. The only problem with DeSantis' strategy is DeSantis. Like, he as a candidate seems to suck, right? Do you see what I'm saying? The strategy is correct, but they put in the wrong widget. And the widget, like, is not very charismatic, and everybody knows it. And in fact, there was a giant political piece recently about how there was a bunch of pieces, one about how his wife actually runs everything, and part of the reason they have her running things, especially in public, is because she's considered likable and he's considered unlikable. We saw the other leak where his advisors told him, if you're going into a debate, remember to write likable on your piece of paper because people don't like you, so you have to try to appear to be likable. So again, the only problem with Ron DeSantis' strategy is Ron DeSantis.
I think DeSantis needs to understand that, yeah, he's got the populist thing, you're absolutely right about that, but he'd better hope that none of these other Republicans he's running against, Trump included, bring up the fact that, yes, he's been the leader of the culture wars, yes, he's done horrid things to our state here in Florida, but it's kind of like an episode of The Twilight Zone, because every horrible thing Ron DeSantis does end up somehow backfiring on him. And I'm not just talking about the Disney thing. I know we all know how he has really just put himself in a corner with that, but I'm talking about the book bans that are taking place in Florida. Okay, well, what's happening now? Now he's getting sued. Most of his policies have gotten him sued. We are experiencing a massive influx in litigation against our governor here. He just passed a 6-week abortion ban in the state of Florida. We know from the midterms, we know from red state ballot initiatives that even Republican voters, when it's put on that ballot, they don't like that. They're not happy with it. And women, obviously, especially, are not going to reward him with their votes for this. So yes, DeSantis does have a long list of accomplishments, but they're not real accomplishments. They're not things that he can go out there and tout, because any one of his opponents can bring up, wait a minute, that's just the first part of the story. Why don't you tell everybody what happened next? A smart opponent, whether it's in the Republican primary or in the full-blown presidential race, can absolutely put him through the ringer by reminding the public what happened next, because that's the part of the story, especially down here in Florida. Most of these folks don't pay attention until, well, they only pay attention to when it happens. They don't pay attention to the aftermath, and that's where DeSantis' record completely falls apart. Yeah, and I want to build off what Cenk said, because he's absolutely right here. 4 or 5 months ago, DeSantis in some polls was beating Donald Trump. He was beating him in Iowa polls. He was beating him in a couple New Hampshire polls. So what happened in the last 5 months? It's not because Trump just started attacking him. It's because DeSantis went out there and had to interact with human beings. DeSantis did his little world tour, and what did we get from that? We got a bunch of memes. We got a bunch of goofy videos. We had videos from last week where he's wiping his nose and then rubbing it on a supporter's shirt.
Pretty big. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Okay, don't back down. You're welcome.
That's pretty disgusting, Beavis.
Yeah, I know.
This man cannot interact with human beings, and that is going to tank him in those early primary and caucus states, and we've already seen what it's done to his poll numbers. The guy should have, done the strike while the iron was hot, but he didn't. He waited till his poll numbers were, kind of going down, approaching Nikki Haley numbers.
Yeah.
And the whole reason for that is the book tour, the trips to Iowa. People finally got to meet him, and they were like, oh, yeah, I'm not good with whatever this is. And that's his big problem.
The thing that has made people question whether Governor Ron DeSantis is truly likable is what he has done to his own state. Last fall, DeSantis, if you recall, rounded up 50 asylum seekers and sent them to Martha's Vineyard. Some said they were misled about their final destination and had expected to land elsewhere. Last year, he signed Don't Say Gay into law, which, in addition to marginalizing LGBTQ people, set off a massive feud with his state's largest employer, Disney. There is Stop Woke, the governor's assault on history lessons about race in K-12 classrooms, paired with his conservative takeover of the state's university system. All of that and more prompted the NAACP this week to issue a travel advisory, warning that the state of Florida has become openly hostile toward African Americans, people of color, and LGBTQ plus individuals. According to NAACP President Derek Johnson, Black lives are not valued in the state of Florida. And now Governor DeSantis wants to make America Florida.
Whatever his best strategy is, I still think has almost no chance of actually succeeding. What he has to do to get through Trump poisons him every time he does it with a Trump base. I think the path is just too narrow, and he's not adept enough a politician to manage it. It is so much easier to fake own the libs in a way that doesn't even own the libs, just harmful, than it is to take down a politician like Donald Trump. I don't think he has it in him.
The way that the media treats DeSantis is very different than the way the media treats Trump. So when Trump does something bad, the media does something rare with politicians, they actually point it out. Normally they cover for politicians and give them tremendous positive press for no reason, other than to suck up the power. But Trump is outside of that rule now. So when DeSantis goes into the general election, we all know the facts. So we will know that he's actually very similar to Trump when it comes to the populist rhetoric and policies outside of destroying democracy, right? But that's not how the media will portray it. The media will portray him as far more moderate than Trump. And he has all the donors in the world, and media is obsessed with donors. So they will give him kid glove treatment. They will not call him a liar. They will not, that's only reserved for Donald Trump and any other outsider. They don't call Bernie Sanders a liar, they just call him every other name in the world, right? So the outsiders get horrible press treatment, but DeSantis is within the tense enough of the establishment that he will get light treatment by the press. So that's why he doesn't have a choice in the primaries. He's got to go populist, and he's got to say he's more electable. That's the only route to win a Republican primary and to defeat Donald Trump. And in the general election, he has to hope that the mainstream media is as corrupt as they have always been, so that they'll call him a moderate, or moderate enough, right? And they won't emphasize all the things that he did that were in our opinion, barbaric in Florida, right? But the press won't want to say that because they won't want to offend Republican voters. So they'll treat him much more pleasantly. Then he's got a chance at winning the general election as well.
How long has this variety of biological sex existed in humanity?
The variety?
Yes.
I'm not sure what you mean by
intersex. The 1.7% that have intersex traits.
like I said before, I'm not an endocrinologist, but I believe intersex
Are you familiar
people
with
have
when the
existed
first
since the
gender-affirming clinic that did transition surgeries existed?
I am not aware of when that existed.
Okay, I'll tell you. Have you ever heard of Magnus Hirschfeld?
I have not.
Magnus Hirschfeld, the Hirschfeld Clinic in 1930 was the first trans clinic. They performed surgeries. It was a safe place for trans and LGBTQ folks to come and be there. Do you know what happened after they built a medical library of information researching the complexities of sexuality and human gender?
I don't know what happened.
It was the first Nazi book burning, when they burned the entire library saying that it was sexually explicit material and then executed half the people involved. Because first they came for the trans kids. Do you want this to be your legacy?
Reichsminister Dr. Goebbels spricht zur Jugend.
And now, even on Fox News, Larry Kudlow is like, you don't really seem to have the evidence. And Ron Johnson goes with a classic conspiracy line, which is the lack of evidence is the evidence because it proves that the criminality has been covered up. This is a classic among conspiracy theorists. Listen to this, folks. This is just embarrassing for these people.
Biden himself, as vice president and maybe as president, has not yet been clearly fingered. The so-called
that's correct. They're trying, they're pointing, but there has not been a successful fingering of Joe Biden. Kudlow is willing to admit it. Good for him.
and maybe as president has not yet been clearly fingered.
Right.
The so-called bribery allegations, pay for play by national, affecting some kind of policies, hasn't that last step or two, Senator Johnson, we haven't really fingered him. And I don't know how important this informant is. I don't know if there's anybody else that could do it, but it seems to me that's going to leave a very big missing link.
Yes, called evidence.
Well, we need all the bank records. I know James Comer hasn't been able to get all the bank records. But let's face it, criminals hide their criminal activity. They don't make it easy for people to uncover their wrongdoing. And so these investigations are painstaking. You've got to pick up one piece of evidence and try and follow that thread to the next piece. And again, when you've got a complicit and corrupt media that won't report the truth, that shows, in terms of all the evidence we already do know of the corruption of the Biden family,
right.
But we still elect this guy president and they're still covering up for him. It's a real issue.
That's a sitting senator casually referring to the president of the United States as a criminal, absent any evidence whatsoever. And listen to what he said. The lack of evidence is the evidence because criminals cover up their crimes, and it's the media's fault. This is classic conspiracy theory circular reasoning, where the conclusion is assumed to be true, and if there's evidence that contradicts it, it's dismissed as part of the cover-up. If there's lack of evidence that contradicts it, it's dismissed as part of the cover-up. Example, QAnon, right? None of the QAnon predictions have come true. That would seem to suggest QAnon isn't credible. Debunks the conspiracy theory, right? Wrong. QAnon believers believe that the media is simply not reporting that Q's predictions have come true. And therefore, Q is right because the media is lying by not reporting how Q's predictions have come true. Oh, well, hard to argue with that, right? Because it's an indefeasible statement. So how do you deal with this? I don't know. How do we prevent people from falling into this trap? There's not a simple answer. Conspiracy theories are extraordinarily complex, and we've had so many interviews about it. There's a psychological component, social, cultural, there's a political dimension, and there isn't a one-size-fits-all kind of solution to disabusing people of conspiracy theories, particularly lack of evidence is part of the evidence. So it's like a broken record. We need to educate people in critical thinking, how to evaluate a source of information, understand whether a statement being made is a statement of fact or a statement of opinion, what is evidence and what is speculation, what is accepted science and what is pseudoscience, all of that. We need to engage with the conspiracy theorists respectfully and empathetically, which I understand is really tough to do because many of their ideas are certainly worthy of being mocked. And then third, we need to create an environment where abandoning these conspiracy theories is welcomed rather than, I told you you were an idiot. We need to make the environment where you abandon the conspiracy theory a welcoming one where it's like, it's so great that you came to this conclusion. I think this is great. And, honestly, having done this, you'll probably be less likely to fall for stuff like this in the future. That sort of thing. But it is not an easy task. And when even on Fox News, they are getting to, you seem to kind of be lacking evidence here. You know that there is absolutely nothing there. And that is abundantly clear at this point in time.
This may seem like an odd comment, but I think that he's very, very smart. He clearly did very well at Yale. He is clearly capable of thinking about big ideas. But, Ronald Reagan was probably equally smart, but he also understood that he had to communicate so that everyday folks understood it. One of Trump's great advantages is he talks at a level where third, fourth, and fifth grade educations can say, oh, yeah, I get that. I understand it. And in fact, Trump has now made the Republican Party the party of working Americans in a way that probably hasn't been true for almost 100 years.
Oh, is that it? Donald Trump has a third grader's vocabulary so he can communicate with everyday folks? Are those folks in elementary school? I mean, my God, if these people had even a shred of self-awareness, they might actually be embarrassed at the verbal gymnastics that they're forced to endure in their groveling desperation to the guy. They might recognize that they're defending someone for sounding like a third grader by pretending that means he's some working class whisperer. In a way, they're actually betraying their own contempt for those same working class Americans by equating them with school children. Just because you work a blue-collar job does not mean that you're equivalent to an 8-year-old.
All right. Well, that happened. I have to just say, Jamie, that do you remember? God, it's probably 20 years now. When Howard Dean was running, and he made that ridiculous "yeah" on stage, and that completely tanked his. And he was
tanked his chances. He was the guy.
He was the front runner.
Yeah,
I mean, he still goes on MSNBC and some other channels and talks about. I cannot believe how that one yell, right, completely demolished all chances of him being able to be the front runner for the Democratic Party. When you look at all the nonsense that has happened in the last 8 years in politics.
But here's Donald Trump going after DeSantis.
Yeah, and I just want to keep one people's, watch the expression that they start with DeSantis when he looks over at his opponent. They're really keyed in, the Trump folks, in a way that the DeSantis people are not.
DeSantis was struggling big time in his primary race for governor of Florida. Polls revealed DeSantis was failing so bad, he was losing by a staggering 17 points. Then DeSantis was saved by the endorsement of President Trump. Trump's support was so powerful, just days after the endorsement.
Oh, pause it right there. Wait. Go back. Because Trump said, get a shot of DeSantis that looks fatter than me.
Yeah.
And here it is.
Yeah, get him busting out of his suit jacket.
Yeah, there we go.
DeSantis took a commanding lead that propelled him to being elected governor.
I'd like to thank our president for standing by me when it wasn't necessarily the smart thing to do.
You're welcome, Ron. Unfortunately, instead of being grateful, DeSantis is now attacking the very man who saved his career. Isn't it time DeSantis remembers how he got to where he is?
Make America great again. Build the wall. Then Mr. Trump said, you're fired. I love that part.
The truth is, there's only one person who can make America great again.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
Let's go. I'm so glad they included that ad on. That was burned into my memory when he ran for Congress.
The most humiliating thing in the world, lack thereof.
He read the Art of the Deal to his children as a bedtime story. That was what it was. The whole ad was centered around that premise.
And here's the thing that this ad captures about the nature of the race. And the reason why Tim Scott has jumped in the race, what's his face from Doug Burgum from North Dakota is jumping into the race, why we're going to see, and mark my words, we're going to see about 2 or 3 other people in that same lane jump in. Maybe there's some talk. I guess Youngkin is not going to, but we're hearing that maybe from New Hampshire we may get. I can't remember. Is it
Sununu?
Yeah, Sununu Jr. You're going to jump into the race. The reason why you're going to see them jump into the race now is because DeSantis is running exactly in the Trump lane, and there's a bunch of other people who are like, well, I didn't realize the non-Trump lane would be empty because everybody thought that DeSantis was going to run in the non-Trump lane. But DeSantis is basically just running. It's almost as if DeSantis is running with the hopes that really putting his money more on the idea that maybe something happens to Trump and he goes to jail or he dies. And so that DeSantis becomes the Trump because he is basically right now destined to be in Trump's shadow. And with this many people in the race, there's no chance of DeSantis being able to marshal the forces, but he doesn't even seem to be going for the non-Trumpy people. He seems to be going for I want Trump, but I want somebody a little bit younger.
But that speaks to the incompetence of the campaign from the outset. First of all, choosing to announce your campaign, which is the moment where you get the most fundraising, more than any other moment in your campaign, where you set the tone for what your campaign is supposed to be. And he did it with Elon Musk on a conference call that had a bunch of bugs where they didn't test it before, and it's an audio-only medium. I mean, just from that alone, you have to understand the level of incompetence that we're dealing with at this point, let alone the way the website looked. And these sound like little things, but the fact that he hasn't been able to pick a lane, or that he's going in the Trump lane, but doing so with like shaking in his boots, means that he doesn't have the nerve to actually oppose him in any meaningful way, and Trump's just going to win in that race.
When the Biden family went to mob school, I believe they fell asleep during the money laundering because it is very clear where the money's coming from, the communist Chinese and many of our enemies across this world, and it flows right into their bank accounts. There's a clear, direct line there.
Let me get back to Director Ray in a moment, but I do want to mention this, that absolutely, according to the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, on record, Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump made up to $640 million while her father was in office, and they were official advisors to the president. If you would explain to our viewers why the Hunter Biden scenario is different.
Oh, that's gonna hurt! Exactly. CNN has announced that on June 7th, there will be a Republican presidential town hall with Vice President Mike Pence. What? You're going to do a town hall with a guy who's not a candidate? If Pence becomes a candidate, we will look at that in more detail. If you thought that this primary was going to get ugly with the entrance of Ron DeSantis against Donald Trump, and it is already getting very ugly because of that, just you wait until Mike Pence gets in. Does Mike Pence really have a shot at becoming the Republican nominee? I don't believe so. But to the extent that Trump gets triggered by so-called disloyalty, you can imagine no more disloyal action from your own former vice president than that vice president saying, I actually think I would be so much better for the country than you, even though I served alongside you, that I am going to run against you. So this is going to be, listen, the town hall is going to be Mike Pence not exactly electrifying the crowd. Mike Pence lacking charisma almost as acutely as Ron DeSantis. And the event itself is not really something that I'm super interested in. But the fact that it's sort of an event for a presidential candidate, even though he's not actually a presidential candidate, really points to a fascinating situation that we will be following extraordinarily closely. That's June 7th. Mike Pence, I guess, looking like he's going to run against Trump. Just wait till you see Trump fly off the handle.
I want to bring in Steve Kornacki now. What's interesting here, and we alluded to it at the top of the show, Steve, right, is that Ron DeSantis' altitude has descended since, let's say, December, January, over the spring.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Hallie, because, I mean, look, here's the list of candidates that in the next hour, I guess we expect DeSantis to be joining. And then there's also this second list of potential candidates who've been making noise the last few months. And I think part of that is related to what you're talking about, where DeSantis, a lot of buzz early in the year. Polling hasn't, tracked with that so far. And so I think you've got some others now saying, hey, maybe there's an opening for me. So you take a look. This is the Real Clear Politics average right here. And you see, obviously, that Trump's way out in front. DeSantis is sitting there now over 20%. But it was tighter at the start of the year, but there is a big line there after DeSantis. Everybody else is mid-single digits or lower. And so I think this is the challenge. This is the question for DeSantis as he launches this campaign. Has a chance to kind of hit the reset button here. Is he able, in the next couple weeks, to move that number up?
Governor Ron DeSantis in Tampa today at Cambridge Christian School, signing multiple new bills into law. Let kids be kids on the podium, serving as the governor's rallying cry for this set of legislation.
What we've said in Florida is we are going to remain a refuge of sanity and a citadel of normalcy. And kids should have an upbringing that reflects that.
Among the new laws signed, SB 254, which restricts gender-affirming care, the medical intervention when an individual's gender identity is different than the one assigned at birth. The bill prevents the procedures on minors as well as puberty blockers, and also requires physicians who administer the procedure to adults to be physically present when doing so. The second bill, HB 1069, is an extension of the Parental Rights in Education law, dubbed by critics as the Don't Say Gay law. This prohibits a school from requiring students and teachers to use pronouns not based on biological sex. It also adds guidelines for books that citizens wish to challenge in schools.
We never did this through all of human history until 2 weeks ago. Now this is something they're having third graders declare pronouns. We're not doing the pronoun Olympics in Florida. It's not happening here.
The third bill, HB 1438, prohibits a person from knowingly admitting a child to an adult live performance and establishes punishments for people or establishments who do. As described in the text, an adult live performance is, quote, a presentation that depicts or simulates nudity, sexual conduct, or specific sexual activities. The final two bills of the day, HB 1251 and 225. The former requires state-run buildings and schools with a restroom, locker room, or changing facility to have separate facilities for men and women based on the sex assigned at birth, while the latter preserves the right for public prayer before high school sporting events, gives high school athletes more options in choosing where they want to play, and also reshapes the board of the Florida High School Athletic Association.
We'll protect kids even when you take some incoming as a result of maybe offending some ideologies or some agendas out there, but that's fine. We're happy to do that.
Strong opposition exists for these bills as Democrats have argued hard against them, and LGBTQ+ rallies were held at the Capitol during the session that ended 2 weeks ago. The provisions in the bills related to gender-affirming care and adult live performances go into effect immediately, while the other three don't take effect until July 1st. In the newsroom, I'm Gio Insignorez, Local 10 News.
Now he's getting sued. Most of his policies have gotten him sued. We are experiencing a massive influx in litigation against our governor here.
Approval numbers. But there was also pressure from the other side, a growing conservative backlash to public health measures across the country. DeSantis couldn't win by trying to please both sides, and with his sights set on a 2022 re-election campaign and a potential presidential run in 2024, DeSantis picked his side, the really right-wing side. In the fall of 2020, he reopened schools and even called it a public health mistake to have closed them in the first place. That fall, he dropped all COVID restrictions on businesses. And in 2021, he signed an executive order blocking local governments from having any COVID restrictions, mask mandates, for example, even if they wanted them. And this month, he got the Florida state legislature on board with his effort to wipe out COVID public health measures for good. He signed into law Senate Bill 252, which bans mask and vaccine requirements and mandatory testing.
Today is the day we're going to hit our 2 millionth senior vaccinated, and I couldn't think of a better fella to be able to have that honor. So I think we have the Pfizer vaccine ready to go.
I've done whatever I did, the normal shot, and that at the end of the day is people's individual decisions about what they want to do.
I had also the privilege to be able to actually sign for the vaccines from FedEx. In Florida, it is against the law to mislead and to misrepresent, particularly when you're talking about the efficacy of a drug.
It's a single dose. You take it one time, you don't have to worry about it. In the clinical trial, it was 100% effective at preventing death. Florida, to be at almost 50% statewide, that's much better than almost probably 45 or 46 other states.
There is a risk for doing it. So why can't our medical establishment acknowledge that? Why the deception?
I want the shots to go in the arm.
And he's not seeing a benefit for this at this point, for anybody with the boosters. That's something that's pretty significant.
My message is the vaccines protect you, get vaccinated, and then live your life as if you're protected. If you look at the data now, the people that have had multiple boosters are actually more likely to get infected right now. I'm 42. I'm going to be closer to the back of the line. But when it is my turn, I'm going to take the Johnson & Johnson.
The vaccine changes your RNA, so for me, that's a problem.
When asked why the governor did not correct that person, a DeSantis spokesperson said the governor has never said the vaccine changes your RNA, and that the question missed the point of a presser meant to criticize vaccine mandates. Okay then.
Get a vaccine because it's good for you to do it.
Governor, have you received your COVID booster shot?
So that's something that, I think people should just make their own decisions on. I'm not going to let that be a weapon for people to be able to use. I think it's a private matter.
Take a look at this.
How are you doing? Wow, look at this. You guys hi, how are you guys? Good to see you. So what do you got? Go right over here? Okay, good deal. Wow.
Crowded, huh? Good. Hey, how are you doing? It smells really good, I'll tell you that. So we'll do it, okay. How you doing? Good. What's your name? I'm Tim Hampton. Okay. How are you? I'm wonderful. Great to be up in New Hampshire. How are you guys doing? Stay tuned, man. We just did a bill in Florida. We're not allowing the pronouns. Like, you can't force these kids to be choosing. They want like a second grader to pick them. How crazy is it?
Appealing to moderate voters is what was reported by the New York Times. He bragged about banning pronouns. There is nothing moderate about that.
Welcome back to Late Night. We're here with John Oliver. Yes. I guess now 2 weeks ago, you did a wonderful piece about Ron DeSantis. Yeah. And he then, the LA Times, I guess he gave a quote to them, and he called you irrelevant.
He did.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fair hit. I don't know. It might be the first thing he said I've agreed with, to be honest. I mean, it's a little rich because we reached out to them in advance of putting that piece on.
So you never do a piece about anybody without reaching out?
No, we had pages of questions for him, and they ghosted us on all of them. So, yeah, his response was literally irrelevant to us. He didn't provide one. Yeah, it's very irritating.
The best detail, and one I'm assuming you did reach out to get clarification on, was that he pronounced on purpose.
Yes.
He purposely mispronounced. He knows you pronounce it Thai, but that he would go on dates and say Thai food.
That's right. That was his technique as a young man on the dating scene. He would mispronounce it Thai food, wait for his date to react, and apparently, if she corrected him, he would end the date because he did not want to be corrected. Which feels like we reached out to find out, like, is this true? If not, please do deny it, because it feels really true. It feels so emblematic of you as a human being. If you didn't do it, arguably you should have done. Yeah. It would have made more sense of who you are.